This is the Orlando Sentinel Editorial Board meeting with the two candidates for Mount Dora City Council, District 1. Carroll Jaskulski is with us, and John Cataldo. And I want to thank you both for joining us today, and we'll spend about a half hour talking. If you could both take a moment and just introduce yourselves and say what you would like about your backgrounds or whatever else you think people might find interesting about you. Mr. Jaskulski, if you could go first.
Sure. Thank you very much for this opportunity. To start, I'd like to say this is not a one-issue job and shouldn't be a one-issue election. I believe that my education and career experience has prepared me to analyze and oversee complex management and financial issues that face city council members. I have spent 13 years on the city's planning and zoning commission. Over half of those I've been a unanimously elected chair, which has familiarized me with the city's land codes and zoning ordinances. And on top of that, I have regularly attended city council meetings. So that equals hundreds and hundreds of exposures to city council government and the way things work. And in closing, my opening statement, I would like to say that taxpayers will not be funding on-the-job training for me. They will be funding performance from day one.
Okay. Thank you. Mr. Cataldo?
Hi, thank you. Thank you for having me. So a little bit about me. I live, work, and play in downtown Mount Dora. I've had a historic home here for 15 years that I operate as a bed and breakfast. And uniquely, I spend so much time walking around the historic district because I have two beautiful dogs. Most people recognize me from my dogs, unfortunately. And I have the opportunity to listen to people. So I think being that I have the ability to listen to so many different people at all different economic levels, I think that I adopted early on people, progress, and preservation as my inspiration for my campaign. And that's truly what I'm about. I'm about people. I listen to people. I work to resolve issues, and I'm a communicator. So I think I have a pulse on what's happening in downtown in the historic district from a personal experience. And as an innkeeper, I wear many different hats all the time. I'm a concierge, I'm a reservation agent, I'm a bookkeeper, I'm a purchasing agent, I'm a media buyer. I understand also, having been on the Economic Advisory Committee for this city, I've been on planning and zoning, how to work with city staff. It's a unique opportunity to understand their challenges, as well as using the challenges that residents may have and bringing them together to resolve issues. And that's what I think I can do for our citizens, not only of District 1, but of the entire city.
Okay. Thank you both for that. I wonder, Mr. Cataldo, if you could start with answering the first question I had for you, which is that, people a lot of times when they're going in to vote, they're trying to understand the differences between the candidates. How would they be different by way of policy or temperament or whatever experience? So I wondered, Mr. Cataldo, if you could just begin by maybe explaining what the differences are between yourself and your opponent.
Well, I think first of all, one difference is I'm a hospitality professional. I'm a people person. I don't have any ties to real estate developers or the real estate industry at all, and I don't have the interest in altering our downtown. I believe in growth, but I don't believe that we should alter our historic district, because I truly believe in preservation, and preservation is not knocking down to build up. It's about restoring what we historically have and making it new. We have other areas of the city for growth that need to be revitalized. And I think that is a big difference between us.
Okay. Mr. Jaskulski, could you respond to the question?
Well, yeah, I completely disagree with my opponent's assessment that that I somehow am in favor of some of the things that he said he is opposed to. I am absolutely in love with the historic district. My wife and I were fortunate enough to find a vacant lot upon which we built a home that is totally, what's the word? It's in sync with the historic district. As a matter of fact, we often get comments about when did we renovate that vintage home when in fact it's only 9 or 10 years old. But so I have as much of a love or respect for preservation of downtown Mount Dora as my opponent claims to have. And in addition, I believe that one of the great differences between us is our background and our qualifications to actually do the job of city council.
Okay. Well, let's talk about growth for a second. Mr. Jaskulski, maybe I could just ask you first to answer.
Sure.
What is your philosophy about growth, and how does your experience as a real estate professional factor into your view of how communities like Mount Dora should grow?
Well, for one thing, my experience as a real estate professional, I can kind of sum that up in terms of my how it's impacted my work on planning and zoning, which, by the way, requires a great deal of absorption of documentation on a volunteer basis. So I've dedicated myself to monitoring growth in Mount Dora for 13 years. And just to give you a little anecdotal background, one of the developers that had a project approved by our Planning and Zoning Commission, subsequent to that, I happened to run into him at one of the local restaurants. And he looked at me and he said, you know, we never thought we would get your vote for our project. And when I asked him why, his answer was, you questioned us like a prosecutor. And I was very proud of hearing that, because Mount Dora comes first, not the development community. And my background in real estate allows me to do that kind of questioning and reveal, if you will, what is under the top layer of the onion, so to speak, with developers.
Okay, if I could ask you a quick follow-up question. In your time on the Planning and Zoning Board, can you think of an instance where there was a particularly large or controversial development where you cast a vote against the developer's request?
You know, there have been so many over 13 years. I know I have cast votes against requests for variances. I cannot signal out one of them at this point. I apologize.
Okay, no worries. Mr. Cataldo, how about you? Can you talk about your philosophy about growth and what you think it looks like in a community like Mount Dora, and not just the downtown? I'm talking about the other areas outside of downtown too.
Well, my philosophy on growth is that there are definitely areas for revitalization. And for example, we have what's called the Uptown District. It's a beautiful corridor. It's the entrance into our town from the new highway system that was put in. It enters from 441, and it is in disrepair right now, I think. And I think it could be revitalized with new buildings and entertainment, and it could be an attractive and new component to the historic nature of what our town is. I've learned that so many people in development, I've talked to our local stakeholders, and they're very, downtown centric. It's all about the historic district. I think in order for Mount Dora to grow, we need to expand to other neighborhoods. Mount Dora has expanded historically through residential development, all on the outskirts. The orange groves are being removed and housing developments are going in. But then those people who live in those housing developments want a certain quality of life. And so they come to downtown because it's the only place that they can go. That subsequently creates challenges in many different ways. So I believe if we spread out the growth to other areas, many of our issues can be remedied very easily. Did I answer your question?
Yeah, yes, thank you.
I can pop in, but one of the questions I was going to ask is steal from Jay. Jay, if you didn't ask this yesterday, but I liked it when you did previously. Jay's fond of asking members if they can look back at the votes that have been cast by the current group of elected officials, and ask is there anything you look at that the majority did and you think you would have voted differently on it? And I guess, John, I could start with you then.
Sure. Well, so you're asking about council, correct? Not about
yes, I'm sorry, not the, council.
Well, recently at one of the recent council meetings, they voted to rezone a residential development, or actually rezone a property on the corner of 46 and 441 from commercial to residential for residential development. I don't think that was wise because the impact that has on our tax base, rather than having revenue coming in from commercial businesses, we're now going to have residential development, which will increase the use of the roads, of our sanitation services, of many different types of things. So I would have voted differently for that. I would have kept it as a commercial property and a commercial development site. I wouldn't have turned it into more residential.
Okay, thank you. And Mr. Jaskulski.
Yes, same question for me.
Yes, sir.
I actually would like to turn that around and disagree with my opponent on that. I think that was an absolutely wise decision to make for several reasons. One of them is, what he failed to mention is that it is a gateway into the city, and the residential development as proposed would be far more attractive than basically a big box store. Someone seeing, for instance, a Sam's Club or a Costco as they enter Mount Dora. And there was also a very strong staff recommendation that rezoning take place. So, and as far as traffic patterns, to assume that commercial would somehow be have less of an impact on residential is really just not accurate. I mean, residents go in and out of their houses twice a day for the most part, whereas commercial draws people in and out of their parking lots from 10 o'clock in the morning until 9 o'clock at night. So, you know, the traffic impact issue that he brought up, frankly, just demonstrates, I think, his lack of understanding of how some of this development works.
Can I follow up and on that and say, and I appreciate you citing that because it is good for voters to have a distinction. But to go back to the original question, is there something that the council passed that you would have voted differently on had you been there that you can think of?
No, sir, not recently.
Okay, thank you.
Can I make a comment on that, on what my opponent just said?
Yes, go ahead.
I think when it comes to commercial development, what they provide as far as a tax base and revenue to the city is far more important. And that if we have the processes in our planning and zoning department to regulate whether or not it's going to be a big box store or it's going to be a Chick-fil-A or if it's going to be a Publix grocery store, we have the ability to restrict and create what we want, but at the same time, we'll create tax revenue for the city rather than creating debts.
Okay. Mr. Jaskulski, I wanted to ask you a question. Can you identify what you think is the biggest challenge that faces the city of Mount Dora right now, and what you think ought to be done about it?
Can I identify more than one? Because we have more than one.
If you must, maybe a top two.
Well, if we have a top two, then we'll start with solving a downtown parking problem, and that is something that has been discussed for I hear from longtime residents, longer than me, back into the 80s. We definitely have a downtown parking problem. It is a complex issue because the downtown is beautiful and deserves to be kept beautiful and preserved. It is historic, and parking structures, unfortunately, are inherently not attractive and historic. However, there are other jurisdictions where attractive parking structures have happened in concert with historic commercial and residential areas. I think if other jurisdictions can do it, we can. But the challenge is to maintain sensitivity to the surroundings and the traffic patterns. And if I had to pick a number two, I would say that long-term budget control, or even short-term budget control, we are blessed with a very, very fine finance manager who does a wonderful job. But I believe that, and here's where another way that my education background, I think, plays into this. And that is, I finished a bachelor's degree instead of with a major and a minor, with dual majors, one of which is economics. And I think that's going to help me look at the national economy and how the impact of that trickles down to us. I think there is no doubt that the country is headed for a rather uncomfortable degree of inflation. And I want to be looking at our budget now and looking for ways to address that impact on us, because if we're all seeing increases in prices at the gas pump and the grocery store, the city is also going to see those. And I want to be able to forecast and address that impact with cost reductions rather than tax increases.
Okay, Mr. Cataldo, maybe one or two of what you think are the biggest challenges for the city right now?
Well, I've said it before, I'm a people person. I've walked this entire district, I've knocked on doors, and I've listened to our citizens. What they're concerned about right now is the building heights downtown of the historic district. District 1 encompasses the downtown business district as well as the residential historic district. Anything that happens to it changes their lifestyle forever. So that's actually very big for them. I'll agree with my opponent as far as the parking issue. I don't think it's necessarily a negative because if you have the amount of people coming to your destination, to your town, that means you have business and you have revenue. That's a good thing. But I do think we need to accommodate people. We both, when we were on planning and zoning, approved the rezoning of a lot so we could build a parking garage. And I think we need to accommodate our tourists and the people who come here. But I do also believe that in building a parking garage, that it can be an attractive looking piece of structure. I recently came home. I grew up in Grosse Pointe, Michigan, and I lived in a historic town. And they built a 2-story garage of 450 spaces that attaches to a Trader Joe's. You would not even know that this is a parking garage sitting at the cafe right across the street from it. So I know it can happen, but that is one of the issues. But I think moreover, listening to my constituents, we have senior citizens who live on a very fixed budget. They handle a $2 increase in their electric bill. They also live in the topography of Mount Dora is very hilly. They can't carry their garbage cans up the hillside. So we need to create some sort of opportunities to help those people out. Those people that live by the boat launch, their quality of life is being, tainted by people launching their boats every weekend. I don't think that's right. I'm a people person, and I think I answered the question.
Yeah, just a quick follow-up for you. When you talk about your concern about the building heights, are you talking specifically about the parking garage, or is there something else being proposed that has you concerned?
No, well, that's a good question. No, there's two concerns. The 55-foot height limits has to do with the downtown commercial district. So right now, because Mount Dora was built long ago, the tallest building, I think, is about 40 feet. And it's changed over the years at different times. But the contiguous structures are 3 stories. So if you build a 55-foot building downtown, it's not going to be contiguous with everything else is going on. The parking garage was that was proposed was 55 feet. It was 5 stories, and it was a beautiful project. It was just in the wrong place.
Okay. So you want the building height limit to be lowered?
No, not lowered. Just kept the same.
Oh, kept the same. Okay. Mr. Jaskulski, I guess I'd like to ask you about that too. Is it your concern that the building heights could get out of control?
It is absolutely not a concern that it could get out of control, and that is because of our very, very tight zoning codes. We've had an ordinance in place with a 35-foot height limit, and in my 13 years on planning and zoning, no one has ever proposed or asked us if they could build a building in downtown in excess of 35 feet in height. And another thing, just to correct my opponent on something that it sounded like he said about a recently proposed structure being 5 stories high, what he failed to mention is the 2 stories were underground, so that from grade it was still a 3-story structure, and that has been pulled off the table, so it is no longer an issue and should no longer be a concern to the citizens as far as interrupting any of the downtown charm and architecture.
Okay.
Now, wait, and let me say one more thing about that, and that is that there has recently been a rather strong public outcry against that increasing that height limit, and I believe every one of us has heard that and learned from it, including the fact that City Council last night approved an advisory board to study that very issue over the next 6 to 12 months and come back with recommendations as to what, if anything, should be done to either increase or maintain the 35 feet. And I'm good with the ordinance as it stands now at 35 feet.
Okay.
Excuse me, you had asked us what our constituents are saying, are the pressing issues? Was that the question?
I didn't specifically ask if the constituents thought that. I was asking what you all thought were the biggest issues. Yeah.
Yeah. I believe in what I hear from my constituents, and that is their pressing issue, is the building heights being increased.
Okay. Jay, looks like you have a question.
Yes, I wanted to follow up with Mr. Jaskulski. You mentioned budget control as one of your top issues, and you said that as a economics person that you were hoping to address things through cost reductions rather than tax increases. I wondered what if you had specific things in mind that were maybe a little loose in the budget that cost reductions might be able to address.
At this point, no, nothing specific. However, as a kind of a broad brush approach, I would be looking across the board at trying to make multiple relatively painless cuts here and there, rather than having any one particular function of the city's government taking a huge hit, because we do have a broad base of spending in a lot of areas. We have Parks and Rec like everybody else. We have a very active arts community, and the city budget contributes to that. So, and then you of course, you have, the public safety issues of police, fire, and EMS. So it would be very difficult, I think impossible, and actually irresponsible to target any one area to take a disproportionate hit as time goes on, because all of those functions are important to various segments of our population, and we need to address everyone's needs.
Thank you. Mr. Cataldo, how would you look at the budget as it stands currently? What do you think of it, and what would you do specifically to address any issues that you find?
Well, I think the budget has been very concise, and it's a challenge that City Council, I never realized as a citizen, they spend over 5 to 6 months going over each budget item and discussing the issues and where they can cut and where they cannot cut. I personally think that one possible way is having an in-house attorney rather than paying consultancy fees. We rely so much on consultants that whether or not it's for planning and zoning or legal issues, that there's an exorbitant amount of money going out for those type of fees. That could be one way. Is it the correct way? I don't know yet, because, like I said, I am a citizen. I had no idea that it took so much time to analyze and compose the city budget. And on council, they come to a great consensus on things. So,
may I address one issue there that my opponent just brought up?
If you could make it fast.
It will be very fast. The idea of an in-house attorney has actually been used in Mount Dora before, and I really wish that my opponent knew more about this. But the biggest problem in a small town with having an in-house attorney is that it is almost impossible to overcome the conflict of interest issue because they have been doing business in town for so long. All the city attorneys that we've hired have actually been from the Orlando area and practices down there. And they specialize in city attorney issues rather than just general law.
Okay. I wanted to ask you both, just as a final question, how much money have you raised for your campaign, and where, generally speaking, where are you getting it from? Mr. Cataldo?
oh my gosh, I have been so humbled. I can't believe the donations that have been coming from the citizens of this district and of the town. I think because they believe in me and my ideas of people in progress and preservation, that they want to support that. I've recently did a GoFundMe page as of yesterday, and I'm completely amazed how people want to support me. I've raised probably about $7,000, I think, but it's changing by the hour, honestly. And that's all going right back into my campaign, with signs and mailers and all that sort of thing.
Are you getting any large donations, and if so, from whom?
What's large?
I don't know, 500?
Yeah, I've gotten $500 donations. I've gotten $1,000 donations. That's the largest I've gotten.
Okay. Mr. Jaskulski, what about you? How much have you raised, and who's funding your campaign?
I've raised a little over $7,000 myself, and I would like to point out that the first $5,000 of that was from me, which I think demonstrates how serious I am about wanting to serve the community, that I was willing to put that much money of my own rather than private donors at risk to become a city council person. The balance of it, I think the largest donation I've probably gotten is maybe 400 or 500. The rest of it, I would say 200, and all from private citizens, mostly friends of mine in the area that want to see me on city council. I have gotten to my recollection, donations from corporations, and especially not the development community.
Okay. Well, we're out of time. I want to thank you both very much for your time and for the discussion, and want to wish you both best of luck. Thank you.